How come Chris Rock can do a routine and everybody finds it hilarious and groundbreaking, and then I go and do the exact same routine, same comedic timing, and people file a complaint to corporate? Is it because I'm white and Chris is black?
So we're going to reenact this with a more positive outcome.
I will play the Chris Rock guy. I would like to see someone else pull this off.
Well, let's have someone who wasn't involved in the reenactment.
Okay. I will play guy listening.
Great, guy listening. Okay, anyone else remember?
I remember.
Great. You're the Chris Rock guy, and you're a guy listening.
Okay.
Basically, there are two types of black people. And black people are actually more racist because they hate the other type of black people. See, every time the one type wants to have a good time, then the other type comes in and makes a real mess.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He's ruined. He's butchering it. Could you just let me? Every time black people want to have a good time, some ignorant ass. I take care of my kids.
Wait.
You always want credit for something they're supposed to do.
Stop it!
What you want, cookie?
The Cows, Gus T. Renegade, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the global, say that like 50 times for this broadcast, especially global system of white supremacy. Today's date, Saturday, January 31, 2026. So I have been told. The Cows here to share constructive information with non-white people, victims of white supremacy. The segment that you just heard, really, I normally play something a little bit before we go live, just so that people, if they're here early, not right at the start of the hour, they'll know that, oh, okay, they're ready to go, and Cows is going to be broadcasting live. So today I was playing when Dr. Joe Fegan visited us some years back. We discussed his book, Two-Faced Racism. Very constructive text on what it means to be classified as white, racist culture. He has a whole big chunk in that text on racist jokes, and that's what we were talking about when he visited with us, amongst other things. But we did spend a good few moments on racist jokes and their import. And then that segment from the sitcom The Office, which is a TV show that was on the air for 10 years, full decade. But that's one of their very first, I think that's the second episode in a series that was on for 10 years, where they have the main character, white male, Michael Scott, doing his rendition of Chris Rock's Black People and Niggers, which is sadly apropos for our broadcast today, which is often talking about things that happened like 250 years ago, and yeah, we ain't made no progress at all. At any rate, we spoke about that segment in detail just a couple years back, more recently than Dr. Joe Fegan's visit, with Dr. Raul Perez, his book, The Souls of White Jokes. Whole book is about racist jokes and the history of racist jokes, even some overlap with the book that we're going to talk about today, but also white culture and those racist jokes. And we even brought it all the way up to current times and talking about Chris Rock and that segment and why it has such resonance with people classified as white. In fact, I can even pause for, we have been talking about COINTELPRO and Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly and all his work on the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover snooping on black people and suppressing Dr. King, and did they kill Fred Hampton and all these other, really terroristic acts under the name of supporting the system of white supremacy racism. Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly did not just write one book. He also wrote Nixon's Piano. We talked about that book too. Even, why is it called that? He starts the whole book talking about President Richard Nixon and how they loved minstrel shows in Washington, D.C., and how some of the most powerful white people in the world, across party lines, we get together and just have a grand old time chortling away Blackface and minstrel shows, and that there's a long tradition of this in D.C. That's how he starts Nixon's piano off. That as well. Lots of different broadcasts come to mind, but what does it mean to be classified as white? What is white culture? And the global system of white supremacy, racism. All of those are important concepts to keep in mind for our broadcast today, as well as for the folks who were with us for our reading of Dr. Tommy J. Curry's The Man Knot, where he talks about fungibility and why that concept is important in the study of white supremacy, racism, and the fungibility of people who are classified as black. Because if you don't count as a human being, hey, you can be whatever, however we choose to misuse you today, and then we'll make up something totally different and new tomorrow, and we'll misuse you in a totally new way tomorrow. Fungibility, very important concept. We'll see if we can revisit today. Specifically, now how we got here, just for orientation for listeners. We arrived at this broadcast today, this specific book and concept, all of it. We got here literally just a few days ago, 2026, so not that long. We had Dr. Chad Montrie as a guest on our broadcast to discuss his book, Whiteness in Plain View, which is exclusively about racially restricted regions and the documented history of people classified as white in the area of the world known as Minnesota, either purging whole areas, towns of black residents, or making sure that no black people can live there, and just all of this really horrendous acts of white terrorism and racial violence. In the midst of all of that, Dr. Montrie, who is a white man, he's going to different libraries and Minnesota Historical Society, University of Minnesota, and other public libraries throughout the state. And he says, man, Gus T., I was inundated with images of minstrel shows. Just, oh my gosh, they were everywhere. And he said it just like that, like underline, boldface print, all caps. And he said it repeatedly too. Everywhere, Gus. They had the minstrel shows and the blackface at the schools, and they had them, the politicians, and they had them at the library, and oh my God, they had them at the church. Religion of white supremacy, but they were everywhere. He said, I'm going to look for how they kicked the black people out of town in St. Paul or someplace. Am I supposed to pause for everything happening in Minnesota right now? We did that last time because we were about hours away from when all that started in Minnesota. But anyway, time is right and exact. But that's what we're talking about. Long history of booting black people out and get out of here. You better get to Wisconsin or someplace else. But Minnesota is not for the Negro. He said, that's what I'm researching. And what is all these blackface and what is going on? He said, man, it was tons of this stuff, even in some of the places where they successfully booted out black people. No black people live here. We don't even have black convicts, but we love a good minstrel show. He said the volume of this content, it made such an impact on him because he wasn't looking for that. He said, I got to write a whole book on this specifically. I said, oh man, we're waiting. Signed copy of the book. He said 2028, it should be here. So I'm got it on my calendar. But that is how we ended up here, because it reminded me like, oh man, that's why I focus on those racist jokes. The Chris Rock skit from The Office and beyond. That's why, because it is important, and that's why it's such a massive volume of this material. So I said, let's see, are there more recent books that kind of address these racist jokes and all that? Why the minstrel shows, why this is such an important aspect of white supremacy. That is how we arrived at the program for today. What did I find? So all of that, what did it lead me to? It led me to the book Transoceanic Blackface Empire race performance. Wow. Have to give a thumbs up to Dr. Maybe I should even send this to Dr. Montrie, because if he's writing, maybe I don't know if the book's finished or not, but that is how we got here, and wow, it makes his point emphatically, which he did himself, because he said it so many times, everywhere. So we're going from the micro of Minnesota to the whole world of minstrel shows. The author of this amazing text, which I will have to say, we read books about racism all the time. We have a book club and everything. All of our guests that come on, they're always about racism. This book uses the term, phrase, if you will, white supremacy more than any of the other books that I have read in some time. And that stood out to me immediately, because we're talking about Blackface and minstrel shows. White supremacy is used more here than in books on prison industrial complex, environmental racism. like it really stood out to me. Woo! Very explicit language about what all of this is. But I mean, again, now if you got people darkening up and such, hey, ain't much euphemizing to be done. Our guest, in addition to writing the book we will chat about today, is an assistant professor of the theater at the University of Buffalo State University of New York. Pause for tops. 2022. Feel like I should even pause for the .22 caliber killer. His academic interests focus on the intersections between performance, race, coloniality, particularly in African and Black diasporic performance. Really fascinating book. It reveals so much about global white culture and what it means to be white throughout the world. Fascinating book. Can't wait to dig in. Joining us live, our guest, Dr. Kellen Hoxworth. Dr. Hoxworth, are you with us, sir?
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us for your Saturday evening. For listeners, I'm sure we have folks who have not nabbed a copy of Transoceanic Blackface, which we'll be chatting about this evening. But if you could kind of briefly just give us a little bit of information about who you are and the work that you do out in New York State.
Yeah, so I am a professor of theater and performance studies. What that entails is basically studying how live performance across history, across large swaths of geography, has informed popular culture. Popular culture is really the main object that I focus on. And so in this instance, in the book Transoceanic Blackface Empire Race Performance, I'm interested in the popular culture of blackface and minstrelsy, which you've been discussing already. And what I'm really interested in this project is how this was a popular culture not just in the United States, but was really a place where anyone who spoke the English language, whether in the United States, in Britain, or in any of the colonies of either of those two empires. We usually think of these as nations, right? The nation of the United States, the nation of Britain. But both of these, importantly, were empires and were sending colonists elsewhere in the world, were expansive projects. And everywhere that they went in the colonies, they would bring their popular culture with them. And so this book really traces how blackface minstrelsy was a core part of white imperial popular culture in the United States, its empire, and in Britain and its empire. And that throughout the 19th century, all the way through to the 21st century, blackface and minstrelsy were just an everyday part of people's lives, that it was just a commonplace that informed how they thought about race. Before they had even really thought of race, it was just their first impression.
The furniture, the doormat, the sofa, the kitchen table, the minstrel show, the furniture of white supremacy. We will dig in. I guess before we get specifically to the text, Dr. Hoxworth, are you classified as a white man?
I am, yes.
Okay. For this broadcast, you use the term white supremacy liberally in this text. We always start off with definitions. I use the term racism and the term white supremacy as synonyms, and I have the same definition for both terms. That definition: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you think such a system exists? Do you think that definition is accurate?
Certainly, the system of white supremacy exists. It existed historically, and it continues to exist in the present. I think that your definition of subjugation being settled through how white supremacy works is also quite apt. There is no whiteness without something that people classified as white can use to define themselves against. So really the creation of racial discourse, racial practice, is a way of defining who counts as white and who does not, so that people who are classified as white can have positional superiority over other people.
Right on. Okay. I guess I'll ground this, is make sure I'm correct. Is it true that you are a professor at the University of Buffalo State University in New York? Is that true?
Correct, yes.
Okay. As a grounding this for TOPS 2022, 10 lives lost there, victims of white supremacy. For anyone who might be hearing this conversation in 2026, nigh on 2030, say, hey, Gus T, we got serious problems. You know, you're talking to somebody from Buffalo, and they had that horrendous, flagrant incident of white terrorism. Still don't know if the race soldier who did all that is going to get the death penalty. Federal court charges still pending. But we got really serious things, and you're sitting here wasting time and then talking to someone who wasted all this time writing a book about minstrel shows from 300 years ago. How does the study of any of this help us understand racism, white supremacy, what it is, how it works, much less replace that system with justice? How does studying minstrel shows and blackface help us with any of that?
So one of the key things to think about with minstrel shows is that they were part of popular culture for so long, and are really the main place where everyday people, everyday white people especially, were working out what we now understand to be racial categories, racial stereotypes, ideas about race, feelings about race, and racialized performance through blackface, through minstrelsy, and everything else that it sort of spawns off. It creates this sort of common sense about race. It's that same common sense that here in 2026 or years ago during the last shooting, it's in the background. It's what we've never really figured out. You referenced a moment ago, I referred to blackface minstrelsy as part of the furniture of empire. That furniture is still here, right? The furniture is still in our culture. Maybe it's not as obvious as it once was, but we haven't gotten rid of it. And so maybe you have people who are picking up new discourses of ecofascism, for instance, and this is an emerging white supremacist argument that is very popular online. It's growing very rapidly, and it's motivating all of these mass shooters. They're still thinking in the same terms and picking up on some of the same ideas that were, planted, that were seeded back 300 years ago. They're riffing on it in new ways, but it goes all the way back. And so part of what I hope by studying these histories of performance, these histories of popular culture, is that we can go back and we can see how so much of this discourse was constructed intentionally in support of white supremacy and in support of empire. And being able to see that, hopefully we can then be more aware and take more informed action to try to create new scripts, new ideas, new ways of thinking about race that aren't building on that same past.
Much obliged for your detailed response, Dr. Hoxworth, and for sure for listeners, keeping Top's Buffalo in mind, the seriousness and even that sort of violence, it comes up in the book. So keep all of that in mind. Another important question I frequently ask when we speak with authors on the broadcast: who was your intended audience, Dr. Hoxworth, for Transoceanic Blackface Empire Race performance? Was this something that you intended for like your students or other people in the white-dominated academy? Was this intended for general population and ignoramuses like myself? Like, who did you visualize was going to be picking up Transoceanic Blackface?
I mean, I can tell you what I sort of hoped, which was probably overly ambitious, but it's sort of, I'm getting a response from you here. I kind of hoped that it would have a very wide reach. It's my first book, and so the first book, you kind of have to follow certain rules and do certain things, so it has to be pitched in a certain kind of academic context. So it's written primarily in that way for other scholars, other academics who are working in related disciplines: theater and performance studies, American studies, popular culture studies, critical race theory, that sort of thing. But Blackface minstrelsy has long been something that has gone beyond the popular conversations about it, have really been featured in television programs, and Daily Show has done bits on it and had scholars on who talk about it. Other programs, tend to touch on it because it always keeps popping up in our popular culture, right? Every couple of years, there's a new blackface scandal. Someone else is found to have done blackface in their past, or someone's doing it on TV or online or something to get attention. And so it's a regular conversation. And so I did write the book hoping that people who encounter those instances usually would have this resource available to them to help understand that this is not something that is unique to the United States, not something that only happens here and in particular parts of the country, but actually well become a phenomenon, and to grapple with the size and scope of that reality.
Much obliged, Dr. Hoxworth. Global, keep emphasizing that for listeners. With you at the very beginning of the text, you kind of give your rationale for using a capital B for black in writing out all of that. I guess briefly, what was your reasoning for capital B for black?
I wanted to use the capital B for black specifically because we use capital letters for other racialized people. For instance, if you call someone Asian, it's a capital A Asian, not a lowercase Asian. If you call someone indigenous, it's capital I, not a lowercase I. So the capital B is to mark people's racialization, right? Like, this is their identity. This is how they identify. And that is something that has been reclaimed historically as an affirmative self-identification, right? Like, people, especially in the Black Power movement, took on black as something to be celebrated, something to be claimed, and so the capital B traces that history.
Okay. And also at the very beginning of the book, you set out, I was eager to ask you about this part. This is from the preface. You write, paradoxically, because this book assembles an expansive archive and critique of the many-headed hydra of white supremacy, that word, it reproduces racist language as it is found in archival materials. In particular, the derogatory term commonly known in the United States as the N-word recurs throughout the archives that constitute the basis for this project, and therefore, in material quoted herein, I have chosen to reprint the term exactly as it appears, which I super appreciate. Like, let's not sanitize. I'm skipping down a little bit after you kind of warn folks. Nevertheless, I insist that there is no need to give voice to this language, and I would encourage anyone reading or assigning material from this book to students to adopt a class policy that discourages any further enunciation of derogatory language that appears in these pages. Coretha Mitchell has devised a class covenant that is helpful in structuring ground rules for class discussions on this material. I recommend anyone teaching from this book to consult this resource. I was struck by that, not so much the inclusion, or not at all by the inclusion of the word nigger in the text. I think that is appropriate, mandatory, really. But I guess if I could get a two-pronged, as this is your first text, you're early in your academic career, did you get any pushback about the abrasive language and having nigger in there directly? And then with this last paragraph, like, I've just never seen that before, kind of encouraging folks to kind of put rules in place if they're going to teach about this, so that they're not just taking some of these images maybe, or the language from the text and misusing it, sharing, kind of appropriating the jokes and stuff. I've just never seen that before in all the books that I've read and studied about racism. Kind of what inspired the thinking there, if I could get a two-pronged question in.
Sure. So first, in terms of reproducing this material, I appreciate that you see that it's necessary. That's how I felt, right? Like, I now based all of these archives. I found, you said in the introduction, right, this material was everywhere. It was just unavoidable. It was just so consistently confronting me. Any place I went to, again, I did archival research in the United States. I went to Britain and went to Library in London. I was in South Africa in the National Library in Cape Town. I was in India in the National Library in Kolkata. I've done research in Australia and New Zealand as well. And everywhere I went, I found the same images, the same jokes, the same language. And so for me, it was very necessary to include that in this book, because I, who had already done I'd read everything there was to read it before I wrote the book in Blackface, I did not know that material was up there. I did not know that the same joke and the same language was being used locally. And so globally also variations, like different spellings, different everything. So if I started editing and censoring it, I was concerned that people just would not understand how widespread it was, right? I was concerned about the impact of it and for the reality of history I was trying to tell. I did, though, get some pushback of it. So I published an article about that came from the book, and one of the people who used the article wrote back to me and said, I really question whether it's necessary to have the N word, being used so much in this. And that ultimately made me realize I had to sort of explain myself why I was doing it. But I think there is a sensitivity, especially because I am white, that some people might think that I'm not sensitive to how inflammatory or damaging this language should be. And so the statement is there to try and frame why I'm making that choice. That's the same reason why I encourage people to use class covenant, or to be careful about how they engage in material, not to start quoting material or sharing it widely. Because ultimately, who's saying it, in effect, how it ends up landing on people. It can also shape what people's intention is, right? Like, you might think that you're in on the joke, or that you're saying it ironically, or that you're mocking it as you're saying it, but that might not come across. And so it's much better to sort of have some clear ground rules around it so that everyone can actually engage the material productively.
Context of White Supremacy. Again, our guest, Dr. Hoxworth, joining us live, professor at Buffalo, Tops 2022. I thought very early on you kind of set out the premise of Transoceanic Blackface. And this paragraph, this is kind of at the bottom of page 6, going right to the top of page 5, where you write, Transoceanic Blackface maps the wide and prolific circulations of racialized performance throughout the Anglophone, English-speaking empire, and the ways in which blackface and minstrelsy enfolded incommiserate imperial subjects and subalterns into colonial racial discourses. For more than a century, the Anglophone empire, encompassing the British Empire, the United States, and their respective imperial projects, was awash in blackface, minstrelsy, and related forms of racialized performance. This book traces multiple entangled imperial histories of racialized performance from the mid-18th century through the early 20th century, thereby demonstrating that blackface and minstrelsy were never bound to any single nation or its particular racial formations. Rather, blackface, minstrelsy, and related forms of racialized performance, e.g. yellowface, brownface, mediated racial thinking and feeling throughout the Anglophone empire. Now, I think that is direct, right to the core, and then the whole book goes on to lay all of that out. Great. I mean, just wow. And white supremacy throughout is said so explicitly, and then some really jarring images along the way. Just wow. If for nothing else, get the book, flip through, and look at some of the pictures. 1,000 words every time, at least, maybe 10,000. For folks, because the system of white supremacy racism does a great job restricting access to education and books for people classified as black, non-white people. If you could restate this for those of us who dropped out of school and such, this paragraph that I just said in terms of, because I keep saying this, white culture, and in terms of forming a white identity through blackface and minstrel shows. And I think this is so important. We talk about this all the time. It's not isolated to the United States. It's not isolated to Great Britain. This is global identity of what it means to be white and being able to enjoy, participate in, recreate these minstrel shows. If you can kind of restate this paragraph for the lower vocabulary restatement of this paragraph.
Sure. Blackface was the most popular entertainment for 200 years in the United States, in Britain, and any of their colonies. And their colonies were global, right? So, as I said before, South Africa, India, Jamaica, Australia, New Zealand, these are all major sites for blackface, minstrelsy, and other forms of racialized performance, like yellowface imitating East Asian people, brownface imitating South Asian people, is being performed for this 200-year period. It's a core part of how white people who are actively colonizing the globe are figuring out how they feel about themselves and the other people in these colonial spaces. It's constructing the core narratives, the core ideas, the core ways that white people narrate their reality to themselves, such that they understand themselves to always be superior to racialized, colonized people, enslaved people, recently freed people. So through these forms of racialized performance, like blackface and minstrelsy, the act work of imperialism, right? The act work of colonialism is being done in everyday popular culture.
Much obliged, Dr. Hoxworth. Folks can let me know if that makes sense. Let us know if that makes sense. If you need clarification on any of the points. I think you kind of give a great restatement of this, and me saying this is white culture, this is why they've been so powerful and why he said they have such resonance where we keep talking about them, and even very powerful people. Governor Northam down in Virginia was like, oh no, he's been in blackface, and they got the pictures and all that. Well, this sort of thing comes up all the time. He writes, this is on page 11, bottom of 11, going over to 12, forging a dense interrelated repertoire. These theatrical and paratheatrical materials promulgated anti-black tropes that satirized black emancipation, freedom, and equality. Though performances of transoceanic blackface were staged in colonial theaters across the Anglophone empire, they were not limited to formal performances or official theaters. The theatrical materials of transoceanic blackface circulated throughout public and private spaces, spectacular enactments, and closet dramas. Its performance cultures constituted material sites in which processes of imperial subjugation and subjectification were both rehearsed and enacted. Across its wide circulations, transoceanic blackface animated popular impressions of racial being and belonging. Its repertoires of racial tropes structured feelings and precognitive apprehensions that cohere to produce material and political effects. Skipping a few sentences, really. Within the affective economies of transoceanic blackface and its performance culture, white subjects were bound together through shared investments in the subjugation of the empire's non-white others. Enslaved and colonized people were excluded from or abjected within dominant structures of feeling and belief. Minstrelsy's affective performance economies were intimately intertwined with imperial projects that managed the public and private life worlds of the Anglophone empire through processes of racialization, gendering, and sexual management. Transoceanic blackface, its racial repertoires and cultural materials transmitted colonial common sense well beyond the bounds of the theater proper, animating common sense impressions about the biopolitical orders of the empire. In other words, the repertoires of blackface minstrelsy were formative of racial epistemologies, white supremacist sentiments, and imperial sensibilities. Now that is a lot, but I think again that is so core to watch. This is white culture, and this is what is being transferred in all of these different jokes as they morph and are shared, as he talks about privately, when they're, sometimes it might just be some 2 or 3 people sitting around in a house reading and giggling together, or it might be hundreds of people together in a big stage performance. All of this is reinforcing what it means to be white, how we should think, feel, speak, act in a world that should be dominated by people classified as white. Am I interpreting this correctly, Dr. Hoxworth?
I think that's a good summary.
Much obliged.
Ways that,
I'm sorry.
Ways that just to add, to think about this is that in the private and the public, they're going back and forth, right? So the materials are circulating and then people are moving back and forth. So people find the jokes popular and they bring them back in private, like, inspiration from them making more jokes, right? Make new jokes. There's this constant circulation of material that just feeds to always more and more and more the same kinds of jokes and variations on them. And that's how the engine keeps running, so everyone's actively participating in this culture.
the repetition, that's something that I noted when I first started like looking at racist jokes, and I kind of look at that all as the same thing: racist jokes, minstrelsy, blackface. But the repetition, where you're swapping the same jokes, you'll hear the same joke like 15, 20 times, like that sort of thing, which even that in of itself is a form of reinforcing it. Oh yeah, we already know. Oh yeah, I already heard that. And all over the world to have that. What does it mean to be white? Let's see. And even the sexual management, that everything comes up in terms of how you should feel, how you should think about black people and white people, I think, as well. But let's see. Words are so important in this text. We literally had just spoken about this, I think, within the last, it was this year, it was 2026, and it was very recent. It was within the last 10 days, I believe we were talking about the word denigrate. And I said, I think that word has connections to explicit racism and anti-blackness and, just talking bad basically about people that are classified as black. And then I'm reading along and it pops up right in the middle of the text on all of this. And even as I said, he gets Dr. Hoxworth getting into the etymology of the term denigrate. Here we go. So this is the bottom of 33. You write, as Polywog Cadet Robert Ramsey recounted in his diary, their induction involved a series of trials, including Neptune blackfacing the initiates, shaving their faces with a dull razor, and generally abusing and abjecting the blackened sailors with rough treatment. Ramsey repeatedly noted the ritual's insistent breeding of violence and blackness. After getting a brush from ear to ear, this is quote, with black paint, I was next lifted up and set on a board, my chin shaved with rather an inferior kind of Windsor soap. Attempts were made to shove the brush into my mouth, and then tumbled head over heels amongst some water, the vessel containing the water being rather shallow. My head came in contact with the deck. Most of our visages had a blackish tinge from Neptune's paintbrush, but especially that of Mr. Moore, who was as black as a chimney sweep, not even excepting his hair and clothes, end quote. In a symbolic rite de passage, the novice white sailors were separated from their identities at home by being blackened and abused. Got to keep those connected in order to make them fit for the unfamiliar and potentially dangerous seas on the southern inverted world below the equator. Here, blackface abjection manifests in a specifically racialized modality, that of denigration, which, as Nicole R. Fleetwood reminds us, is linked etymologically to Latinate roots that entangle abjection with blackening. Nigra, that's kind of the way I say it frequently, nigration, denigration. Wow. The rite marked a transition from the white world of the global north into the darker, mysterious oceanic realm of the Anglophone empire by turning white sailors black. Now, you had me at denigration, but this whole passage, this is chapter 1. This is not a minstrel show per se, but it is very much linking those same concepts with what I said in my definition: subjugation. You are no longer white. Oh Lord, we are the darkest of dark. This is the worst ever, and we have to be blackened up to emphasize it in every way possible. But just that, I so appreciated your attention to detail there, and why the etymology of the term denigration is important, even for a starting point for our understanding this culture of white supremacy and minstrelsy. Like, what kind of led you to unpack that term right at the beginning for us?
Well, one of the things I think that is ironic about, as careful as we want to be with language, this kind of goes back to what we were discussing earlier about whether or not to include or reproduce the N word, right, as it appears in historical materials. If you're using the word denigration, you are already using that word, right? It's actually deeply interwoven with how we think and how we talk. People will use denigration without realizing that by saying that this is a way of, treating someone lowly, of, putting them below, or, abusing them, right? Saying that they lack status or are losing status, that they're literally saying what the word means in its roots is they are being blackened. And so this is a chapter where I'm really interested in tracing some of the core structures of blackface performance. And one of the first core structures that gets woven into blackface in British culture, in white British culture, is this idea of high and low. That before you even get to the United States and plantation society and everything like that, you have a structure of servants and masters in the British household, where the servants are on the upper floors, or the servants are on the lower floors and the masters are on the upper floors. And once you start getting servants, of course, they're in the lower floors. And they are understood to be the lowest of the low. So even within the servants' quarters, right, there's a racial hierarchy. And understanding that denigration is already naming this vertical hierarchy between high and low and turning it into racialized language was really important for me, and so that's why I spent some time with it at the beginning of the chapter.
Brilliant, Dr. Hoxworth, brilliant. And I was one of those people who had I had stopped saying it, but I did not recognize that. Oh, wow. And that is I say nigger. I say nigger all the time. I've said it that way for years, and that's exactly the way it is in the word. Man, brilliant, Dr. Hoxworth. Okay, so you move forward to talking about unpacking these different like ditties and performances of blackface and minstrelsy, and this is from Charles Didbin's Negro Philosophy. And wow, I appreciate the inclusion of pictures, and I appreciate the inclusion of some of the exact verses so that people can kind of really hear, read, see exactly what we're talking about. So you write, again, this is Charles Didbin. The lyrics are, chingering, chingering, never mind, no use to fret about it. Buckra yam, yam, but Negro kind, forced to go without it. Nothing to do but lie down flat, while overseer he jerk ye. No peace, no sleep, no yam, get fat. After worky. This is at the top of 41. End of the lyrics, obviously. In the ensuing stanza, the singer Cudjoe narrates a scenario of the slave master raping Cudjoe's wife, Quashi, that concludes, chingering, chingering, never mind, what done can't be prevented. Buckra, well, a Negro kind, wear horns and be contented. Neither Dibdin, nor his black-faced character Cudjoe expresses any concern for Quashi, rape victim. This narrated rape is framed as the contented cuckolding of Cudjoe rather than as the traumatic sexual violation of an enslaved black woman. As in his wider blackface ovary, Dibdin narrated scenes of black subjugation as comical anecdotes in which black captives enjoy their individual and collective suffering with song and good humor. I found that many of these are fascinating, but I found this one fascinating for lots of reasons. One, this is an important point that you emphasize, that black people, victims of white supremacy, are presented as, hey, they are not victims at all. Cudjoe, they love this. Kwashi, they love this. This is the greatest time ever, and hey, it ain't no suffering here, ain't no terrorism here, ain't no victims here. This is a really important point that gets emphasized, and really it reminded me of like Gone with the Wind and like more present iterations. So I was thinking like, oh, that's kind of the way that they talk about like the Civil War and that sort of thing. Like, no, this has been going on for a long time, like centuries. Hey, slavery is not, even while slavery was with us, slavery is not bad. Like, hey, them dark people, they love this. Like, nobody's beaten or raped her. This is wonderful. Important that we get this early on, that these minstrel shows and blackface, that white people are early, like centuries ago, promoting this lie. Slavery isn't bad. In fact, black people think it's okay.
Right, yeah. And I think that there's something about this really earthy material too that's fascinating in an additional way, right? Like, we were very familiar with the Gone with the Wind and, you know, the sort of happy mammy archetype and just the way that black servitude was so naturalized for so long, going back through the minstrel show. The song that you're quoting here from my book is one that comes before we even have the minstrel show. And in many ways, it's quite more, it's a lot more rough, right? It's not quite as polished. It's not even editing out the violence that happens on the plantation, which the minstrel show usually would do, right? It would try to displace it. It would try to minimize it. It would try to turn everything into just a happy Gone with the Wind image, right? Here, the song's about the violence that's being done on the plantation to black people by white masters, right? The physical violence, the master is physically abusing Cudjoe. The master is physically raping Kwashi, right? So violence is happening everywhere. And then the violence is still turned into, but it's all okay. And so there's something that's really fascinating about this early material in that the white imperial culture at this historical moment was openly talking about the violence that they were doing. Openly, like, saying songs about this, and then saying, and it's okay. We get later versions that, again, try and use the violence, try and get rid of it. But here, it's just right in everyone's face. So that's a core part of, again, this particular historical moment when, for whatever reason, right, this is part of, I think, the white imperial culture's understanding that this is just their natural right, is superior, and that this is what comes with that superiority.
Singing songs about raping black females. And black males are, hey, where you going? Woo! White culture. And then that's the other part that stands out so much for me. So much of this text talk about white culture and how you should think, how you should feel as a person classified as white, how you should behave, what you should think about black people. So much of this text comes back to, hey, these, especially these black boys, they are going to try to rape white women, and something has got to be done about that. Othello and all the rest, just over and over and over and over throughout this, and all over the world this is talked about, and hand-wringing from white people about this. Wait a minute. Why are you coming to rape Cudjoe's wife Kwashi if, hey, we're not supposed to have no miscegenation? You know, you stay away from the dark people and don't let her. Why are you? You don't want to mess around with Kwashi. I mean, come on. She's another one of these ape monkey black people. That hypocrisy I point out all the time. Like, which is it? Are you trying to come and rape Kwashi, take Cudjoe's wife, Or do you not want the black people to have sexual intercourse? Which is it? That hypocrisy, and it's so early on right in your face, because we're going to get into so much of that. No, the niggers are trying to rape the white women. The early on hypocrisy right there, Dr. Hoxworth.
Yeah, for sure. And so one of the things that's you're already pointing out is all of this racial discourse, all of these like songs, studies, narratives, everything. They're always about race, but that narrative about race, the stories about race, are always also about gender. So white men, of course, are really at the center of the culture of blackface and minstrelsy. That it's white men who are the primary audiences for this, they're the main performers of it, and so it's primarily about them getting to do whatever they want or have their fantasies fulfilled and so forth. And so it's in part about them being positioned all the way at the top where no one can tell them anything, right? Like no one can set boundaries on them. This is their work. That's the fantasy of white supremacy, right? It just belongs to the white men. White women, of course, have positional superiority over all racialized people in this structure, right? The mistress of the house is also going to be able to tell any racialized person, any colonized person, any enslaved person what to do, and is protected by the law and so forth. But her position depends on her relationship to the white man. So she is on a dependent relationship with the white man. And because of that, white man is very anxious about protecting the white woman from all of these racialized people, because his status as having everything belong to him is based on him protecting her, his property, legally, from everyone else. It's about him preserving his status by proxy through her, and his racial status by proxy through her. So all that anxiety about white women being potentially vulnerable to black men, to other non-white women, white men, is really about the white man protecting himself in his position. Just like these songs about white men doing whatever he pleases with whoever he pleases is about him being able to do whatever he pleases with whoever he pleases, right? So it all comes back to this elaborate structure of race that is intertwined with gender and sexuality.
Context of white supremacy. Very important, pointing out the predominantly white male nature of the audiences and lots of the performers at this period that we're talking about, although certainly that is going to change way down the road, but at least what we're talking about now, way white male dominated, and that like that is fascinating that they would feel this anxiety. Meanwhile, can you leave Kwashi alone for a day or two? And they are alleging to have this anxiety about, oh man, they're going to take our white women and all the rest of it. Later on in the text, again, this notion that black people are happy slaves. There's no problem here. And even really mocking. We talk about this on a regular basis. One, I think it's important because it kind of belies this notion that white people are ignorant. Not ignorant at all, because you point out frequently white people are mocking counter-racist efforts. That's deliberately coming through in some of these songs. Black people either saying, hey, we think there's something racist about these minstrel shows, and they make a song to mock the black person about that. Or a black person saying, hey, I think slavery is bad. Maybe you should let us free. Oh, we'll make a minstrel song to mock you about, like that sort of thing. You cannot be ignorant. That is very willful, very deliberate, and some of these, type songs become super popular too. You write later on, this is page 43, the chapter Eddies in the Anglophone Imperial Stream. You write, far from celebrating black freedom, the play instead revels in the restoration of the imperial racial order. Freed from slavery in a fantastic scenario of white benevolence, Juba voluntarily commits his future labor to Hartwell for free. Reynolds laugh when you can. What is funny repeats this figuration with its character of Sambo. I was so struck by this. Just wow, they've been using the character Sambo for like hundreds of years. Jesus Lord. Anyway, Sambo, an emancipated black servant who feels he couldn't exist without his master Delville, in a scene redolent with the ontological confusion endemic to abolitionist fantasies of emancipation, Sambo asserts that he is still Delville's slave, prompting the ensuing exchange. Delville: no, not my slave. I gave you liberty. Sambo: you did, sir? And that made me your slave. Gratitude has bound me faster to you than all the chains of Africa. These several plays retrace a prevalent trope of British abolitionism that performs what David Bryan Davis terms a leap of psychological imperialism by picturing emancipation as a conversion to voluntary servitude. In these scenarios of emancipation as enduring subjection, abolition literally reproduces slavery by another name. Douglas Blackman, so pleased. Nevertheless, enslavement continually erupts throughout these scenes, voiced by black servants who choose to remain slaves to white masters. I thought this was so important. I've heard some of these songs. I think Paul Robeson has sung some of these songs. They just everywhere. It wasn't so bad. And in fact, we want to stay on the plantation. Slavery wasn't bad. White people were awesome, and we're just indebted forever. Like, this is so important, promoting this sort of, I'd even convince maybe some of us victims to think this way too, that slavery really wasn't that bad. But you write that this was and the mocking component, I think that is so important. Even mocking white people who say, yeah, maybe we shouldn't be doing all this. They get mocked in some of these songs too. Yes, Dr. Hoxworth?
Yeah, absolutely. So two things here. Like, the first is that this is a moment in British history where Britain gets rid of the slave trade before the United States. And then it makes this major political change. They kind of have to immediately give themselves a complete makeover. They have to completely reinvent how they understand race happening in Britain and in the Empire. And so they can't get rid of the fact that enslaved people still are enslaved in the colonies. They got rid of the slave trade, but not rid of slavery. So slavery still exists. So they have to start doing is thinking about why slavery can still exist. And the ways in which the racial hierarchy that slavery established, they keep on top, not they keep the bottom, but keep on the very bottom, is somehow natural or somehow worth perpetuating now that slavery doesn't exist anymore. And so suddenly it becomes that the white British people are so morally good by abolishing slavery, right, by getting rid of slavery, that everyone would naturally want to serve them. Because they are just the angels of this planet, right? They're just the chosen people. So it's something that then does get picked up in the United States after this war. It happens even within religious circles before the war, where you have a lot of white abolitionists resisting being positioned as equal with the people that they're arguing should be their equals, because they want to maintain some kind of superiority and it kind of translates into a superiority. And so they say worse is better, right? And that's really the narrative that's going on here. The mockery here is really key because it's a way always containing a possibility, right? If you can turn something into a joke, you can sort of diffuse any threat or any fear or any anxiety about it. So the reason why Blackface plays minstrel jokes, all these songs, always go to this mocking humor is it's a way of containing and diffusing these really profound anxieties about the potential for white people to lose their status, to lose their position, to lose their authority. And fast forwarding quite a bit, that's really to how a minstrel show works. It's for the center of the minstrel show. It's white people mocking black people. That's just the big part of the minstrel show. But within that, there's a lot of other jokes, a lot of other targets for ridicule that come into the minstrel show and become, again, just these objects of scorn. So, for instance, women are very frequently in the minstrel show as mock characters, especially women who are arguing for equality, right? Feminists, anyone who's an activist, anyone who is an abolitionist, white or black, is going to come in for scorn in the minstrel show and become this part of jokes and songs and things like that. And at the end of the day, it's anyone who's threatening to challenge the white supremacist social and racial order, no matter who they are, is an available target and a really, in the logic of the minstrel show, a deserving target of this kind of humor.
Context of white supremacy. Another point that I say with the racist jokes forever, this would apply in any century. White people cannot be ignorant about racism. You don't get the racist joke, you don't get the humor of the minstrel show if you are ignorant about racism. You would be confused about all of it. In fact, a lot of this is predicated on you already know this. And what I said, you've heard these, what I already said, you've heard these songs before, you already know Sambo, you already know Cudjoe, you already know. They assume you're not ignorant about racism. They assume the same thing that I do. White people are not ignorant about racism. Now he says the white people's anxieties about black people abolishing slavery and such, that comes through in some of these skits and ditties and minstrel shows, the blackface performances and such. He writes, this is on page 53, when black people mobilized to celebrate abolition, northern whites drew from the repertoires of scriptive blackface to mock articulations of black freedom in cheaply printed abolition broadsides. Oh, I cracked up laughing when I figured out, what all this is. As the term abolition indexes and articulates, the broadside circulated the core tropes of scriptive blackface, namely the mishearing of black speech, following the precedents of Raccoon's impotence in the disappointment and Ralpho's desistible disposition in the candidates. The abolition broadsides staged black claims to importance, desirability, and political freedom as abject failures. In the words of Gene Baker, the abolition broadsides figured processions asserting black political agency instead as evidence of a feckless black population unable to pronounce even the words of freedom. In keeping with previous articulations of scriptive blackface, the abolition broadsides were visual materials designed to be read aloud. The broadsides were complex texts that included multiple modes of discursive impressions of blackness, encompassing crude woodblock images of black figures, mock toasts articulated in broken English, and proto-minstrel songs in the form of parodic love ballads, while the images staged theatrical scenes of black freedom either as ostensibly comical parade scenes or as stereotypical impressions of black freedom as drunken dissolution, the print material offered white readers scripts to be read or sung aloud. For instance, the 1827 broadside Grand Jubilum, spelled Jubelum, Order 12F, Anniversary of Africum Babolition, includes 2 proto-minstrel songs in the right-hand column. And I will stop there. I'm so glad I was able to read that without acting too much a fool or messing up too many terms. All of this I found stunning. Again, this is mocking counter-racism, saying people that want to get rid of slavery, and it's mocking saying black people can't even speak correctly, so they do not deserve justice or correct treatment. I think it even took me a minute to recognize, like, oh, that's supposed to be abolition. I'm like, oh my God. And then once I got to see some of these pictures, wow, you cannot be ignorant about racism, white supremacy, and miss all of this. Wow, can you give us more information about these abolition broadsides and what they're conveying about the people that want to get rid of slavery?
Yeah, for about 20 years, there's an active anti-slavery movement in Britain and in the United States. And it is an interracial movement, right? Because there are white abolitionists, there are black abolitionists, different kinds, right? All different kinds of solutions. But what immediately happens is the post-slavery forces start to try to define their enemies, try to define their opponents. And they do that using the same kind of popular culture, text, song, tropes that already were starting to become popular in plays at pubs and everywhere else. So they start picking up these examples and riffing on them in this new form. And the broadside is a very cheap, very accessible publication mode. So it's something that would be used to go just basically put a poster up on the wall of a pub or on a street corner or on the wall outside of a building. And so it's basically all it's akin to graffiti or that kind of public art. And it's here to try and define the terms of this debate about slavery. And at the center of it, as you just noted, is a joke, a very simple, very obvious joke once you know to look for it, which is that abolition is for this racist pro-slavery crowd, how they are imagining black people saying the word abolition. They are imagining that black people who are seeking freedom, seeking to abolish slavery, can't even properly pronounce the word. And that is supposed to delegitimize them, right? It's supposed, first and foremost, through this, lens of mockery, to say that they are not actually the equals of free white people. That they are a different type of person, that they aren't even able to speak English because they can't speak English properly. They actually deserve to be classified as racially lower, right? As racially subjugated below white people. And these tropes, these core ideas about quote-unquote broken English and black speech being a form of broken English are really there at the very beginnings of Blackface and minstrelsy. They're some of the first jokes, and they're there just saying that this is a different kind of human who can't actually speak the same way and therefore doesn't deserve the same rights as white people.
Wow, that is important as well, that this goes back centuries in terms of the justification for the system of white supremacy racism. Leroy and Lakeisha, see, they got broken English. See, they can't even talk correctly. So yeah, you're not even worthy of justice. You need to go and take a few grammar classes. What? What? This is at a time where you have a high population of white people who are not literate, but whatever. Whatever. And importantly, in these abolition broadsides, we get the same theme that these no-count, illiterate, stupid black people, they're going to come and rape our women. Did I missee? Doesn't that come through as well in the broadsides?
Sometimes with the broadsides in the broader sort of visual culture of this period, there's a lot of bigger images that start emerging, both in the United States and Britain, where not only are you dealing with the abolition broadsides, which are mostly written, so sometimes songs and things like that are kind of minstrel songs, do exactly what you're saying, right? It's sort of how we horrible fantasies of racial violence, or sexual violence, so that sort of thing. There also starts to be basically an early cartooning culture that really focuses on producing images of what the world would look like if black people gained freedom and equality with white people. There is a major British artist named Cruikshank who has a couple images of this. He inspires an American artist named Clay. And so I included some of those images in the book as well. And these are all about trying to, again, just paint the most grotesque, inverted world, right? Like the world completely is trying to play down once black people have their freedom and start having equality with white people. And so in these images, you have black men trying to move white women, you have all sorts of fighting and drunkenness, and basically it's the idea that all civilization ends the second that black people attain their freedom.
Wow. Again, I said this book is pretty good. Lots of constructive material. What is white culture? What does it mean to be white? Can white people be ignorant about racism, racist jokes? I mean, lots of things that I think are really important to grasping what it means to be white. But these pictures, wow, they are worth some time to just sit and wow. And some of them, they are so detailed. Like, so I'm looking at, this is figure 3 on from actually going back to chapter 1, page 58. This is George Cruikshank, The New Union Club, 1819, and just wow. And even like, so right in the center, and even I'm no art student, but my small bit of ignorance. So what's in the center of the image? A white man with a black female right on top of him, and then seated right next to them is a black female with a white man seated on top of him. And it's just fighting, brawling, violent black people. It looks like a black male has a broomstick and is assaulting a white man who has lost an arm, incidentally. I think that's important. It kind of suggests like things have gone so bad you might lose a limb. Like anything might happen once, all of the chaos, but it's just got drunken and debauchery. I mean, it is amazing, all of this. Like, this is what, hell will be wrought if we do not allow white people to continue enslaving black people. But these sort of images, and like I said, you did have a high population of illiterate white people at this time. So something like this, we got it. I don't need to read like, whoa. It reminded me, this is 100 years later, it reminded me of Birth of a Nation. Even though that's like 20th century, that's light years ahead, but it is the exact same imaging, even though that's video by that time. But oh my goodness, the Civil War ends. It looks exactly like this. It looks exactly like this. But what could you just talk about the power of these images and being able to circulate throughout the world of what this is what and you talk about the anxieties. How are these images supposed to play on the anxieties that white people would have about the end of plantation slavery?
Yeah, you already said two really important things about this. First, visual culture, just like minstrelsy, blackface performance, it's available to people who can't read, right? Not even illiterate people, right? People who are never even given the opportunity to learn how to read, right? It's not that they lack the skill or whatever. It's just that they don't have books. That's not how they orient themselves in the world. They are going to have a visual culture, right? They're going to have a sound culture. And so what all of these images are doing is translating these ideas for a mass audience. And so that's really part of the whole function of them, is that they are designed for mass appeal. And they are, as you're saying, it's kind of hitting you over the head with it. There's no question what this image is supposed to be doing and supposed to be communicating to you. This is a riotous scene. This is a world that is out of control. And it's out of control, as you're also saying, in the same way that Birth of a Nation is imagining a world with black equality, which is that it's a world in which black people who have equality are starting to be political actors. So if you remember, there's one scene in Birth of a Nation where it specifically wants black people to start to be elected to political office. And all of a sudden, the actual political, the hallowed halls of the government, and people putting their feet up on the table and eating chicken, yada, 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 all these racist jokes show, right, like just how disgraced this stately and hallowed process of American government would be by inclusion of black people. That's the same joke. Not even translation, the exact same joke of the New Union Club. The New Union Club is an ironic title of this image, which is that this is supposed to be a political organization. This is a political organization for the advancement of black people, for the equality of black people. And then this is how it's being imagined, right? The equality of black people means the world ends, basically. So both of those points are really key. Again, first, this idea that this is for a mass audience, and second, this idea that it's really the same joke. Minstrelsy does not actually change all that much over 200 years. They changed sort of the shape of the jokes, they changed the specific articulations of the joke, the different punchline or whatever, but the structure of all the jokes is the same because it's always there to support the structure of white supremacy.
Context of White Supremacy. Our guest, Dr. Kellen Hoxworth. Transoceanic Blackface. Fascinating text. And even what he just said, the repetition, the structure is there. A lot of those racist jokes, current day, 21st century, same thing. The structure is there, and they're repeated. Same thing with the minstrel shows and performances. Where, of course, we already know Sambo. It's great. We love it. The fungibility, how they can be repurposed. I think that's so important, even globally, repurposed for maintaining the system of white supremacy and kind of that camaraderie amongst people that are classified as white. In chapter 2, this is on page 78, you write, only 5 years prior to Thomas Rice's arrival in London, Thomas Pringle, the secretary of the Anti-Slavery Society, published The History of Mary Prince, a West Indian Slave, 1831, making this sentimental African prince a prime target for anti-abolitionist parody. Rice's British adaptations covered expansive anti-abolitionist ground with the figurative backdrop of Jim Crow shifting from the plantations of Kentucky to the circum-Atlantic imperial coastlines of Britain, the Caribbean, and the Gold Coast, as Rice's performances targeted not only black Americans, but also African and West Indian black imperial subjects. His Jim Crow doubles reveal both the fungibility of Jim Crow and the expansive imaginative terrain of Rice's anti-abolitionist racial project throughout the Anglophone empire. The transoceanic career of Jim Crow demonstrates that blackface minstrelsy's enactments of racial subjection were not distinctly U.S. American, but rather functioned as novel articulations of broader theatrical repertoires and colonial discourses about race, I would add white supremacy. I think that's massively important for a number of reasons, but just in terms of making sure these racist performances, minstrel performances, all of that, one, this is not something that is unique to white people in this part of the world, the United States. Sometimes you have some of the same types of skits being adapted to be used throughout the world for the same white supremacist objective, and I would think ostensibly targeting just a different population of people classified as white, but same effect. We can just change up a name or two, switch up a location, a few different circumstances, and same anxieties of people classified as white, and we expect the same result. I think that's massively important in terms of what it means, global culture of white identity. Unless I misinterpreted, did I get this right, Dr. Hoxworth?
You got it very much right there. And again, the key here is, there are some characters like Jim Crow which become globally popular. In many ways, the first instance of global popular culture icon is T.D. Rice's Jim Crow. It's being performed literally from New York to London to Cape Town to Calcutta, India, to Sydney, Australia, right? Everywhere there is white imperialism within the British Empire, within the United States. This is the hit for about a decade, and it continually gets refashioned, as you were just saying, to local politics, right? To speak to local racial dynamics, and that's the sort of fungibility at the center of it, which is that you can constantly change this form of blackface as minstrelsy on its characters, and yet the structure stays the same. The function stays the same.
I also thought it was important there because that also have said, and unfortunately it's nothing to brag about, but I've just said, man, I could see how one could easily get the impression, just studying how racism functions, studying how white people behave and how they talk about black people, one could easily conclude Negras is Negras. Passage like this right here, where we just easily can, and even why you would have a white person who would have a project where I oppose black people being free in Jamaica, Mississippi, Haiti, anywhere in the world. Like, why would that be a project? Like, any black people that say that I oppose that, let's make a song about that. That is striking just any people classified as black, and we'll get the song and make it apply for them. That would stand out as well to me. Negras is Negras, and just what it means to be black anywhere in the world.
And I think that it speaks to how it perceives a global process. In this time, you have some of the things in the background of the book that I tried to say out a couple times, but it's always happening. You have white people moving throughout the world. Not when you think of like a colony, you tend to think, okay, it's this part of the world, and there's artists there, and then there are people at the home country, and people here, and that sort of thing. But white people are constantly moving. They're moving from Britain to the colonies, moving from colonies to other colonies, they're moving from the colonies to the United States, Britain, the whole thing. Right? So because of that, you have this constant those are invested in a mutual project. Americans were invested in British imperialism in Africa. You have Americans who are invested in British imperialism in the Caribbean. The Caribbean is the clearest example because this is very apparent in the 1830s when Britain is getting rid of slavery in its colonies. There's a panic in the United States because you have this mass of black people in the Caribbean, in the British colonies, who are about to get freedom. And so all of these white Americans are suddenly very concerned. What does that mean for black people in the United States? What does that mean for slavery in the United States? And so that's what he writes is actually actively doing. He's trying to go around and in many ways propagandize for the reason Britain should not be getting rid of slavery, should not be emancipating enslaved people in its colonies, is because, and then he performs the Jim Crow character, right? He performs the Jim Crow plays that he puts together, and it's all there to try and convince white people of the naturalness and the necessity of both white supremacy and its articulation as the slavery system.
Fascinating. Dr. Kellen Hoxworth with the context of white supremacy. The furniture of empire, the racist jokes, and just the fungibility. They can be so Sambo can be adapted anywhere in the world. Got it? And the white audiences will know. What shall I say? I was eager to hear more from you on the Hutchinsons specifically. Now, he starts to talk about Dr. Hoxworth in his book. He talks about all these minstrel troops, and he had pointed out before that some of the content we've been talking about predates when you start having these formal, like, minstrel and blackface troops traveling throughout the world, really. But once he starts to detail some of these different groups and who was in these groups and where they performed at and the songs they did, fascinating. But he starts out with this group, the Hutchinsons, and they're supposed to be, I guess if there's a group in the book here that are ostensibly not racist, I guess this would maybe be one group you could submit, maybe. So this is on page 93, Ensemble Blackface Minstrelsy Belts the World. He has such great titles for the chapters in the text as well. So he writes about the Hutchinsons. See if I can pick up a nice sentence here. It remains unclear whether the Virginia Minstrels intended their name and their performance as a direct parody of the Hutchinson family singers. Nevertheless, the consonance between the New Hampshire Minstrels and the Virginia Minstrels is suggestive, particularly considering blackface performers' propensity to parody mock abolitionism. In any case, the antagonism between the Hutchinsons and early blackface minstrel troops was obvious, as Brian Roberts notes. The Hutchinsons have been referred to as the period's anti-minstrels. However, this formulation succumbs to the ruses of blackface hagiography that insistently claimed originality and authenticity for blackface performers. By contrast to this aggrandizing framework, it is important to recall that the Hutchinsons performed as minstrels prior to the advent of ensemble blackface minstrelsy. In opposition to the Hutchinsons and their abolitionist minstrelsy, blackface minstrels invented themselves as anti-minstrels, or in the discomfiting joke that identified blackface performers as burlesque negations of white minstrelsy throughout the Anglophone empire, nigger minstrels. In other words, blackface minstrelsy began as an anti-black joke, and it was an exceedingly popular one. That's why I said I was fascinated to learn more from you about this specifically. So I guess before we get into the anti-black joke of this all, the Hutchinsons specifically. So in New Hampshire, you have this group, and they are an abolitionist minstrel group. Is that true?
It's one of the tricky things about history. That what we were minstrelsy now, instead of blackface, there's no question that minstrelsy and blackface basically means the same thing to us because of the minstrel show. But prior to 1840, minstrelsy, a minstrel just meant a traveling singer. Right? And all the way back to medieval England, you'll hear people talk about thinking about the minstrel who goes around and sings songs. And so that term was used by popular singing troops in the 1830s and 40s who were singing, remains some popular melodic singing, right, getting together and doing small concerts, that sort of thing. And the Hutchinson family started them up as this very, it's very similar to something the Hamlet family you saw in the 1970s family or the Austin family is got singing vibe. It's very much flexible, very buttoned up, very family entertainment kind of thing. But they're devoutly religious. They're very puritanical, and part of their puritanism is this strong abolitionism. Right? A lot of the abolitionist movement is highly religious, so they are equally devoutly committed to the end of slavery. So they're singing about, the importance of family and all of that, and they're also singing about the importance of ending slavery. And so they are a quote-unquote minstrel group, not a blackface group, but a minstrel group, is opposed to slavery. You then have the very first blackface minstrel group thing, the Hutchinson family, right, by the Hutchinson family. Essentially, but the argument I'm trying to build here is that all of the choices that they're making here line up directly with the same kind of jokes that are already in circulation in blackface performance culture. And so you have blackface performers getting together to suddenly perform in groups for the first time, being the indirect response to this anti-slavery family performance group.
Okay, and I appreciate the distinction there and just pointing out historically that you didn't have the blackface performing minstrel troops until a little bit later on. The Hutchinsons kind of predate that, but this New England group of white singers, they are against slavery. I said they're puritanical in what they're singing about and such, and then they're subject to all of this. I think you even write they eventually perform with black people. Is that true?
Yeah. So there's a black group in the 1880s of the family, and so they share a stage with the Lucas family and Hutchinson family share a stage together. And these are all really strong statements that are being made because they're actually, official bans on, having interracial or interracial audiences. So the Hutchinson family is, in many ways, just very radical, right? Like they're really trying to push against all of these ways that white supremacy is structuring everyday life, especially through performance culture. And so there are all of these scandals and moments of controversy that surrounds them. And meanwhile, blackface minstrelsy is continually, mocking them and doing parodic versions of their songs.
There are many points in this book where I chuckled, where laughing at the blackface performances and such. This was another, but again, you cannot be ignorant about racism if you are informed enough to know there are allegedly some white people and they're doing things they're not supposed to, breaking rules, performing with black people and singing that they're against slavery and all the rest of it. You cannot be ignorant about racism but then participate in all this mockery of these other white people. Same thing I said too. If you are white, you can't be ignorant because you will get in trouble with other white people. When they start mocking you, I'm saying that right there, you are in trouble. You continue with the Hutchinsons. This is at the bottom of 95. The Hutchinsons later actualized anti-abolitionist fears when they inspired the Luca family singers, a black abolitionist troupe who performed at the Anti-Slavery Society Convention in May 1850. Led by John W. Luca, the Luca family shared the stage with the Hutchinsons for a series of abolitionist concerts in Ohio in 1859. Blackface minstrel performers responded to the threat posed by such interracial abolitionist performance by insistently parodying the Hutchinsons and burlesquing their egalitarian refrain, "We're a band of brothers," as a blackface pen to essentialize racial difference. The Christie's minstrels made such burlesques of the Hutchinsons a mainstay of their concerts, performing "We're a Band of Brothers," a burlesque on the Hutchinson family. I thought that was so funny. They put their name. And I know that should be funny but I laugh at a lot of the racist jokes. Anyway, throughout the British Isles, the piece remained in the Christie's minstrels' repertoire during their transoceanic imperial tours of the 1860s, prompting amateur and professional blackface troupes in Cape Town, Mumbai, and across Australia's goldfields to reprise the anti-abolitionist burlesque. That staggered me a little bit, Dr. Hoxworth, like, whoa, whoa. Again, you're going to talk bad about me all over the world where people talk bad about you don't even know the Hutchinsons. You're going to talk bad about us. I laughed at that one, but you have white people all over the world singing songs and making jokes to keep black people in shackles. All over the world. These Australia, Mumbai. You don't even know where Mississippi is. What do you care about slavery White culture. It continued, just to finish the paragraph, through its wide circulations, the repertoire of transoceanic blackface was adamant in its opposition to the Hutchinsons and their brand of righteously abolitionist and respectably middle-class white sentimentality. Founded on abolitionism and invested in racial subjection, blackface minstrelsy entrenched anti-black pro-slavery politics as central to discourses of Anglophone imperial popular culture. Massively important. That again, like if it's cemented, that again, you can't be ignorant about this. And that's white people around the world. If you are classified as white, you are supposed to support the enslavement of black people. Very important, unless I misread that. I think that is so massively important, Dr. Hoxworth, to have white people in all of these different locations cheering and simultaneously mocking these white people for violating the white code and then cheering on enslavement of black people.
Absolutely. One of the things I think bears to that like the fact that they have to call out the Hutchinson family singers by name in the title of the song, right? Because the joke has to land. Everyone has to get the joke. So even if you don't know who this is, minstrelsy is going to make sure you understand that joke. It's not a subtle performance, right? Like there isn't, a joke that maybe half the audience gets in minstrelsy. Everyone's supposed to laugh at the joke. So much so that in some of these places, right, like when it goes to Cape Town, the newspaper prints explanations of who the Hutchinson family singers are. so that the local audience can be primed to go to the show and get the joke. And how the humor works is, again, we all are in on it. We all are laughing together at this other person, right? And most of Minstrel see that's we all the white people in the audience are laughing at the black people, right? They're the butt of the joke, we're all together. But in the case of the Hutchinson family singers, it's we all are a certain kind of white person, we're laughing at this other bad kind of white person. So the explanation of who the Hutchinson family singers are is that you know how they are bad white people, right? Like, what is it about them that is deficient or deviant and therefore worthy of us mocking and making fun of them? And in this case, it's that, like, they're too serious, right? Like, they're too buttoned up, right? Like, they don't have fun like the rest of us. And so we're going to make fun of how serious these people are who actually have a anti-slavery politic. And this is actually one of the subtle ways that minstrelsy can work, where not necessarily making fun of them all the time because they're anti-slavery, it's making fun of them for not performing whiteness the way. And not performing whiteness the right way ultimately is that they're not pro-slavery, that they're not pro-imperialism. But the hook of the joke is that they're too respectable, right? Like, it's too serious. They're too somber. They're living spiritually devout. And by the way, what the two is, they actually oppose white supremacy. So the way that this works is both sometimes very obvious, other times very insidious. But one way, both of those characters, they make sure that white supremacy is always defended on all sides.
White supremacy always defended on all sides. And after repeat, Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., he said, if you are white, you cannot be ignorant about white supremacy racism. You will get in trouble with other white people. They might even make a song about you and take it all over the world. Really, that is the least of it. It could be way worse, but at minimum, they might make a song about you and mock you all over the world for not behaving correctly as a white man, white woman, white family. Incidentally, were the Hutchinsons, were they in this group of white people who wanted slavery ended, but they wanted the Negroes to leave and go someplace else, or that sort of thing?
There was a lot of this rhetoric around colonization. I can't speak definitively about whether they were pro-colonization, which would be like yes, I want the abolition of slavery and, emancipation of black people as long as black people get sent to Haiti or to West Africa or something like that. Off the top of my head, I don't want to commit them to any of that. I'm sure that scholarship is out there. But it is important to note that white abolitionists were not always supportive of actually living in the same country with free black people or welcoming free black people into their society, right? One of the most famous examples here is that Abraham Lincoln, at the beginning of the Civil War, was still in favor of African colonization as the solution rather than actual equality of black people in the United States.
Very widespread sentiment amongst the, I guess, limited number of white people who were in support of ending slavery. Very, very common. A white person opposing slavery does not equal white person not racist, not by a long shot. You on page 104, you write, this is in chapter 3. Man, he already mentioned that these minstrel shows, the performers and the audience, it's a lot of white males that they're targeting with all of this, a homosocial environment. A lot of the performance, racial drag, where you'll have a white man dressing up as a black female, which I find fascinating as well. He on, as I said, page 104, kind of midway second paragraph, he writes, in 1851, the New York Serenaders became the next major professional blackface minstrel troupe to tour Australia. The company formed in New York City before touring to California amid the gold rush. They departed the gold fields in 1849, toured to Honolulu in early 1850, then returned to California before sailing to Tasmania in early 1851. There's that moving around Dr. Hoxworth mentioned. This troupe advertised themselves as a successful band of globe-trotting singers, emphasizing the transoceanic scope of their tours across Mexico, the cities of South America, California, the islands of the Pacific, and Van Diemen's Land, and en route to the East Indies, the continent of Europe, and Great Britain. The troupe arrived amid the discovery of the Australian gold fields and altered their itinerary to capitalize on the newfound wealth of the colony. As in California, minstrelsy became the popular performance repertoire of and the soundtrack to the masculine homosocial world of Australian mining towns. Nevertheless, the New York Serenaders did not appeal exclusively to a white working class audience. They also appealed to middle class audiences by publishing a songbook of their Ethiopian melodies designed for use in their parlors of respectable homes. I found this fascinating, as I did the racial drag, but just this homo-social, at minimum, environment of all of these white guys coming together to watch other white dudes pretend and sing these songs and act out pretending to be black people and putting on black makeup as a black person to sit here and laugh and sing songs and all of this and jokes, and they parade in all of this. Sometimes it's all of these white dudes to sit and watch a white man dress up like a black female and laugh and joke about all of this, and then to sit and complain the niggers are after our white women, as we sit together and watch a white man pretend to be a black male or pretend to be a black female. Like, it is bizarre, certainly, but I mean, whoa, what is going on here with this? This in some way is a performance of white masculinity, to be with my other white brothers and mock niggers.
100%, right? Here, that's really the core of minstrelsy's popular culture, is white men getting together to work through their ideas, their feelings, their thoughts, their beliefs about their place in the world. And this is because of, the political context in which minstrelsy is flourishing. It is an imperial culture. It's a culture that's based off of the supremacy of white men over the rest of the world. The white men have dominion over the rest of the world and the people in it. And so exactly what you're talking about, which is it's a group of white men on stage, in many ways laying claim to other people's identities, right? Performing these other identities, saying, like, I get to define what a black man is like on stage. I get to define what a black woman is like on stage. And white men in the audience then enjoying that, right? Taking pleasure in that performance is really central, right? It's a basic architecture of the minstrel job. There's one additional layer, though, to this that I want to draw out, which is that within this, there's also a lot of competition between white men that is structuring minstrelsy. Because all of these tours are in competition with each other. All of the different troupes are in competition with one another. And oftentimes, the various performers in a single minstrel troupe are rivals with one another, right? They're all competing. This is a capitalist performance form. They're all trying to get as much money as they can. They're trying to be the best. They're trying to make things to, the most original whatever else. So what you see play out is really the way in which relationships among white men structure the entire performance economy of minstrelsy.
And what is the, again, to have white men who, a big part of this is threats of black males, the threat of black manhood, what'll happen if they're liberated from slavery, what'll happen if they get too much power and come after the white women, what to make of that. And when we juxtapose that with, frequently, you'll have a white man dressing up, pretending to be a black female in blackface, and there you have other white men come out to enjoy and guffaw, chuckle about all of this. What to make of that, and what to even make of white manhood and all of that?
So, with the idea that minstrelsy is working through anxieties about maybe black men coming and taking, white women from white men, minstrelsy, the minstrel show, it dispenses with that. It doesn't want to stage that. It in many ways puts a lot of those aside and stuff, right? But it shows these black men as being, in many ways, socially intense, right? Politically intense, sometimes really actually. I think that the joke is that I'm afraid of that. In the show, black men aren't a threat. Black men are, tamed, domesticated by the humor and the structure of the minstrel show. There's a wider fear that the minstrel show makes safe and makes comforting and allows white men to relax and sit in comfort. And so that's a big part of what it's doing. Why the black male characters, the Sambo characters, the Jim Crow characters, and so forth, are such ludicrous clowns is that they are therefore non-threatening. A similar thing is going on with this blackface drag, right? A white man performing as a black woman, is that it is in many ways trying to control and divert white male sexual desire for black women. It's making fun of the idea many times of black women as being sexually desirable. One of the core jokes is you have the burliest, most masculine appearing white man in a dress and in blackface, and that's the blackface female character, which even these tropes of black women as not being proper women, right? Like they're imagined in this time to be physically different than white women, right? And they're imagined to be more muscular, less feminine, et cetera, and that gets laid out by putting, again, a big man in a dress and in blackface, so that we can all laugh at the idea that anyone would desire her. Again, this is not, in any way, changing the reality of white male desire for black women, which of course is happening. It's happening with all kinds of sexual violence. But with the minstrel show, there's this good world in which all of this is safe and made safe through humor.
Fascinating. I was reminded of Dr. Thomas A. Foster's Rethinking Rufus as well in the midst of all of this, in terms of the white male desire not just for Kwashi, the black female, but also for Sambo, the black male as well. But that doesn't get talked about frequently. This would seem to kind of fit in that classification or that thought process as well. White man dressing up as a black female for the entertainment of other white men, maybe even to soothe their anxieties about black males' masculinity. It reminded me, that response, of one of the sections in your book where you talk about one of the performances that I guess did not soothe white male anxieties. You spent a lot of time talking about Othello and the many permutations of Shakespeare's Othello performance, another cowbell, and ways that I had not even thought of, but kind of skipping way down the line in the text. This is 133. Othello Travestied is the chapter title, where you write, contemporaneously in the 1820s, black performers began to embody Othello and to stage scenes of interracial contact and intimacy. William A. Brown's succession of African theaters in New York City served as the earliest site of such performances, where James Hewlett took the stage as the earliest known black American performer of Othello. Though Hewlett's performance as Othello was paired with a very handsome copper-colored woman as Desdemona, the appearance of a black Othello with a figuratively white Desdemona on the New York stage was greeted by a white crowd who noisily disrupted the performance by hurling food at the actors in a social performance akin to the rough music of the charivari used by groups of young white men to regulate sexual morality. Such riotous white audiences, bolstered by Mordecai Noah's anti-black attacks on Hewlett in the New York press, forced Brown to close his theaters. Now, that is one of the different and this is not a minstrel performance, I guess, per se, and this wasn't even with a white woman, copper colored, and it was enough. Furious, what is going on? They have to close the whole production down, but you have lots of different and even you have so many different responses to white audiences seeing this black character and sometimes so-called noble black male in this arrangement with a white woman, and their response, the disgust, and this too, this becomes another source of mockery. We have all these minstrel shows that just parody and make fun of this whole idea, but I mean, it's just why you have lots of examples of the minstrel shows, this being a part of violence and how we're conditioned to think of the normalcy, the common sense of white supremacy and everything that accompanies it, violence and all. This is kind of a different end of the spectrum. Like, whoa, we have, like the Hutchinsons, you have violated the white code. What is going on here? We didn't pay money to see this, and you all better get on out of here and close the whole theater down. Like, that is fascinating, although you give a lot of examples of white people being displeased with Othello for lots of different reasons, Dr. Hoxworth.
Yeah, so, Othello is, in this period, a big problem for white audiences. Othello is part of the Shakespearean canon, right? Shakespeare is in this historical moment becoming, he wasn't for a long time actually imagined to be the best playwright in the English-speaking world. That's a later invention, but this is part of when he's being lifted up and turned into this pillar of white culture. And so, with that, you have this play that has what people then start to debate, like how exactly to racialize Othello, but like historically imagined to be a black character, maybe an African character, definitely a Moor, but what if a Moor sort of goes through a lot of different interpretations over time, and those interpretations are really motivated interpretations. People are trying to resolve this problem. You have this great figure of English literature who wrote a play that has a sexual relationship between a racialized character and a white woman. So how do we make sense of this? If this is supposed to be high art, what do we do with this character, right? How do we justify him? How do we, make sense of the relationship? And so some of this is, again, imagining that, well, he can't possibly be black, alone, could say. He must have been imagined to be a different kind of race. Like maybe he's lighter skinned, therefore he's not a black guy, and so he can still be a warrior figure, he can still be noble, and that's how we resolve it. But other people go in a different direction. They're like, well, actually, the problem is with Desdemona. The fact that Desdemona ends up with Othello is the tragedy of the play. The very idea of having a white woman who would desire this kind of relationship is what motivates everything that follows. these are profound misreadings of the play, right? Like the whole point is that everyone's just trying to read the play through the lenses of white supremacy, of imperial racism, and they're coming out with different justifications for it. At the end of the day, right, Othello goes through all of these different transformations, all of these quote-unquote legitimate stage. One of them is that black performers start to play the role of Othello. So William A. Brown, famously the founder of the first black American theater in the United States, stages this play, as you just read from the book, and again, the fact that there's a black man performing as Othello is really the source of major anxiety. It makes undeniable how Othello is imagined to be racialized as book in this production. Ira Aldridge, a black American actor who goes to London to make his career, does the same thing in Britain and meets similar audience responses. Him being a black performer forces white audiences to view Othello as undeniably black, with and in direct physical contact with white actresses on the London stage, and all of the anxieties and responses that come from that. So that's the sort of historical context for what then followed, which is this proliferation of basically minstrel-type plays that reinterpret Othello as a laughable buffoon, as a sort of minstrel character, as a clown. So if the logic here is basically, from a minstrel perspective, if Othello is black, then he can't be noble, he can't be tragic, he has to be a joke. And all of these different minstrel versions of Othello insist on turning him into exactly that kind of joke.
I had no idea that there was this large canon of Othello minstrel plays and such, where they say you can't even pronounce Othello, so it's the same sort of thing, Otello and all these other, crude mockeries of the name, and the anti-black tropes are still there. And of course he's with a white woman, so it's all the other anxieties that we've talked about. But I was not familiar with that at all, nor really was I familiar with it. They rioted at the theater in New York, and this is at the bottom of 130. You write, in March 1786, not even that long after the founding of the country, so-called, Abigail Adams, the future First Lady of the United States, recounted her experience of this Othello production in a private letter to her sister. I lost much of the pleasure of the play from the sooty appearance of the Moor. Perhaps it may be early prejudice, but I could not separate the African color from the man, nor prevent that disgust and horror which filled my mind every time I saw him touch the gentle Desdemona. She sounds just like the white fellas who rioted up there. By contrast to comic commentary that emphasized the humorousness British audiences found in staging of blackened skin, Adams' apprehension of the play fixated on the tragic potential of miscegenatory contact, Othello's touching the gentle Desdemona as a source of deep racial anxiety that overwhelmed her with physical revulsion. John Quincy Adams evidently shared his mother's affective response to the play. After his single term as President of the United States, Adams published a series of articles on Shakespearean criticism, including several on Othello, wherein he rationalized his feelings of disgust at the sight of interracial contact as the purpose of the play. Despite Adams' avowed abolitionism, now see, that's what I said, you're supposed to, just because you say you are opposed to slavery does not mean not racist, not at all. He voices profoundly anti-black interpretations of Shakespeare's play, attributing his anxieties about the play to the figuration of Othello as a rude, unbleached African soldier, visualizing interracial contact and the intermingling of black and white blood. as the central dramatic crisis animating Othello, Adams articulated a contorted vein of criticism that posited the ostensible dangers of racial amalgamation as the great moral lesson of the tragedy. I'm not an English student nor a student of theater, English, none of that. But I have never heard that interpretation of Othello that the moral is no interracial. that is news to me, but okay, grousing shouldn't have no black dude with white. This is future, and he's someone that I've heard people point to and say he's not a racist. He didn't own slaves. He opposed slavery. Show him Othello and see what he says, or his mother, and see what she has to say about all of that. I found all of that fascinating. I'm so glad that you included it. Just wow, the response to all of this, and just seeing the anxieties of a black male touching a white woman. She deserved to die. That's what you get. That's the lesson that we should learn. Did you find lots of this when you went back to study this time period, this sort of interpretation that you heard from the Addams family?
Yeah, so first, I think it is key that I think you pointed out that both Abigail Adams, right, wife to John Adams, second president of the United States, John Adams was anti-slavery. Again, had a lot of thought about especially racialized performance, right? Like a lot of anxiety about exactly these sorts of things. The idea of actually seeing bodies touching on stage, especially differently racialized bodies touching on stage, was a huge source of anxiety, right? And in many ways, that's something that was going to happen before the actual emancipation of black people in the United States. So already people are rehearsing, they're working through the thoughts and the feelings, the ideas that they're going to have if black people are free and equal, members of this country. And John Quincy Adams, again, I forget which number of president he is exactly, but John Adams' son, after he's president, this is how he spends his days, is like just sitting here thinking about Othello and being like, yeah, the real problem of this play is Desdemona and the fact that she is like violating the quorum of white womanhood. She isn't doing what she's supposed to do by choosing to be with Othello. And as you put it, very adequately, very properly, she therefore deserves to die. What I encountered is that there is a vein of this criticism, not just in the United States. There are other critics in Britain called Charles Lamb, who has a sort of similar idea about a similar interpretation to Quincy Adams. Again, this is pointing to the fact that white supremacy is in flux all the time. And so it's trying to figure out how to negotiate and renegotiate, how to understand even some of the most central facts of the literary canon, of the dramatic canon, so that it can fit those into whatever we're saying the racial order is right now. And clearly, this is a moment of profound crisis. It's right in the middle of all these debates about abolition. It's in the middle of all these debates about slavery, anti-slavery, pro-slavery. And so Othello becomes this really charged icon of what awaits on the other side of emancipation, what awaits on the other side of equality. And again, like we saw in some of those earlier minstrel image, or even before minstrelsy is formally, developed, these early blackface images, there's always this idea that the whole world is going to come crashing down. Second, black men have equal status to white men. The second black men are able to be in the same kinds of relationships with white women that white men currently enjoy. And so that's the sort of nightmare reasoning that haunts all of these various interpretations of Othello.
Context of white supremacy, and all of this about white anxiety, non-white people having sexual intercourse with white. We have heard that forever. And the hypocrisy, go back to the very beginning, the hypocrisy. If that's the case, stay away from Kwashi, if that's the case. No, that's, like, couldn't be. I guess last, before we let you enjoy the rest of your Saturday evening, wow, there were so many, or I guess I'll make sure I get to the fungibility, because that comes up in so many ways. It returns even with Othello, and how, because this play was performed all over the world, still is, and used to serve white supremacist purposes throughout. This is on 129. You write, if Frederick Timpson I owns the freed slave, imagined political freedom as an inherently white property in a sense of travestied liberation, then Othello in its many burlesques animated the greatest danger to the Anglophone Empire's patriarchal racial hegemony as the sexual freedom of non-white men and white women. In the words of Anne Laura Stoller, these plays placed sexuality at the center of imperial politics and at the center of imperial racial formations. Theatrical stagings of Othello offered white audiences a site to engage with sexuality as what Michael Foucault identifies as an especially dense transfer point for relations of power that functioned as a linchpin for transnational racial formations throughout the Anglophone Empire. These various articulations of Othello were remarkably fungible, and the play was often adapted to encompass other interracial scenarios and attendant anxieties in accordance with popular white imperial racial sensibilities. The broad array of orientalized and blackface Othellos constituted a mutable yet stable theatrical repertoire that assured white audiences, and especially white male audiences, of their flexible positional superiority over the Anglophone Empire's racial others. I thought that was very significant as well, because you at many points talk about how adaptable many of these racist scripts are, just depending on where you are geographically, or even depending on, what the current news of the week is, to have a play like this where you can switch it around and you talk about to have, well, maybe we'll have an Asian person or some other non-white, non-black person, but we'll basically get all of the same anxieties and white fears. We can tap all the same things in the play that is, and even knowing, regardless of whether we're in Australia, Mississippi, London, South Africa, knowing with white people, we know what we have in terms of marketing these racial anxieties and the culture of white supremacy racism. I thought that was fascinating. And again, we keep coming back to guarding Area 8 and white women. This happening globally with the marketing, or I guess with these different plays and burlesques of Othello, Dr. Hoxworth?
Yeah, one of the ways to think about this is the fear about white women is a product of empire itself. It's a product of plantation society, plantation culture itself. You have a political structure that demands that white women go out into the world where they're in this really close, intimate proximity with racialized people. So the empire needs white women to go out into India, needs white women to go to Australia, needs white women to go to South Africa or Jamaica. Needs white women to go off the American frontier, right? Needs white women to be part of the plantation. And because of that close proximity to racialized others, this is what churns up all of these racial anxieties. White men, by white men, right? Among white men. Is that there is this necessity there. And so they can't deal with the fact that white women are just right here, part of this imperial culture that as a contact zone between white people, between white people and black people. And because of that, all of that needs to be worked out in some way. A lot of imperial politics is actually this really intricate working out of exactly what laws are necessary to be manage sexuality among differently racialized people so that we don't have interracial sexuality, right? This is what all of the various anti-miscegenation laws in the United States are all about, is we have the fact of it, right? There is going to be some kind of sexual contact among people who live with each other, live close to each other. And so the state needs to get involved in trying to stop that from happening. What shows in these plays, and both the sort of dramatic takes on Othello and the blackface and minstrel mockeries of Othello, are all different ways of using theater, using performance, using popular culture to help support that state project of trying to control and contain interracial sexuality. It's trying to help coach people, help teach people what the proper ways of being in the world are. And so they're using Othello as, in many ways, an after-school special kind of thing, right? Like, this is what happens if you have interracial sex. This is what happens if you allow yourself, right, to fall for the wrong kind of person. And then the blackface are to just make fun of the very idea of this. Isn't it absurd? Isn't it ludicrous? Isn't it just laughable to imagine that a black man would ever actually be able to have a white woman? And again, that is there to sort of coach white audience of like, okay, yeah, this is how the racial structure works. This is how our society is meant to be run. And so you have this sort of two-pronged attack. One is like trying to scare people into compliance, and the other is trying to assure them that everything's okay and that their status is secure. And that all gives us a sort of sense of how both of these are happening at the same time.
Wow. That your response right there, it reminded me, Dr. Hoxworth wraps the book up and he talks about this anecdote of Eliza, who is a black female. She's gone to one of these missionary schools and she goes out, she sees black people, she sees white people doing blackface. And this is like her first time. It's just like, what? They do this. I think one is like a ritual that they do every May or something. And then she sees like a performance and she's like, what? And she's writing about this, like, oh, okay. And they were saying that these performances, even for some black people, this was their first understanding of blackness and what it meant to be classified as a black person in a system of white supremacy. And my thinking was that I think these performances would have to equally, if not more so, reveal way more about what it means to be white. I don't use the phrase whiteness. I guess that would be the corollary. But I mean, you are looking at people classified as white. Even if this is their projection of black people and you pick something about that, you would have to be, this has to be conveying. That's why I did the program today. This has to be conveying something about what it means to be white. Don't you think, Dr. Hoxworth?
Oh, 100%, yeah. So when I'm writing about Eliza and the fact that she is referring to the blackface performers as black themselves and herself as black, I'm trying to just tease out the way that blackface, minstrelsy, and racialized performance was actually so central to racial discourse. The everyday, the common sense way that we understand these terms. And would happen first and foremost through popular culture, right? This isn't something that you would go to a mission school necessarily be taught. Like, this is exactly who fits into what category. This is how the whole racial structure of white supremacy works. There isn't necessarily a class where people are sat down and taught that. Instead, it's something that you learn through everyday life, right? Through encounters with popular culture and everything like that. her diary entry about this performance, I didn't just see that happen. Your point, though, right? Like that entire racial discourse is a discourse of white supremacy, right? It is how she is being enfolded into the racial hierarchy, how she is being categorized as black, akin to, right, other black peoples globally, right? Here in the diary and in the report, we don't actually ever get told. It doesn't say like what her ethnicity is, right? Who her people are. That's sort of a mystery right now, right? I haven't been able to track that down. All I know is that she understands herself to be black. But again, that's something that she's being taught by this this imperial culture. This is something that she's being taught, is to think of herself as racially the same as blackface minstrel characters, right? The same as any other person who is African, right? Any other person who is colonized. Now, again, there's a different history of people reclaiming blackness, right? Claiming their blackness as a source of empowerment. But the key here is that, like, that's not what she's doing. Here she is learning the culture of whiteness and for it in it. It's a difficult sort of task because you have a young child. She's 11 years old, but she writes that. Being taught white supremacy.
Wow. That's... Turn on the television now to some degree. Not the same. At least for me, I learned so much reading this book, the global nature of white culture and so many other components, and even the history of minstrel shows going back way further than I thought. The global history, not something unique to the U.S. at all, not even close. But for me, it's certainly for one, I've pointed out with the racist jokes forever, and like I said, I think this is minstrel shows, blackface, same thing, that if white people were ignorant about racism, they would miss the funny haha of all of these jokes, the plays. That's not even possible. Much less if you're ignorant about racism and failing as a white woman, white man, and your responsibilities to the white race. The Hutchinsons, white people will let you know, sometimes unkindly, but at minimum, you'd miss all the jokes. That's not even possible to. And as he said, even with some of the jokes, white people make sure you get the funny. They put it in the newspaper to catch up, just in case you missed out or didn't quite catch it. You're late, you out of town, or whatever the case may be. White Neely Fuller Jr., brilliant. He said, white people cannot be ignorant about racism. And I think it's important because so frequently people lie, and they will say that white people are racist. They might even say, well, I participated in these minstrel shows or blackface. I was ignorant. I didn't know it's offensive. I didn't know it upholds racism, that sort of thing. All of that is a absurd lie because white people cannot be ignorant about racism. Your book I'd point to as Exhibit A. This right here lines up. I really didn't see examples of white people who are ignorant about these jokes, or I didn't get it, or I don't understand, or what are they joking about? Sambo. I didn't really see that at all. Really, it's you are supposed to know these jokes, share them with your white family members and friends so that we are transporting the values of white supremacy culture and dominating black people. Like that one of the main takeaways that I got from this book. White people cannot be ignorant about racism. You are white, you're expected to know your duties about being white on this here planet. Thus, and this should be shown, you know these racist jokes. What is that? Am I being logical, evidence-based, Dr. Hoxworth?
Thank you. I mean, very much this book offers readers is there's a long sort of recent history of scholarship on blackface minstrelsy that tried to make the case that yes, it was racist, but there were other things that were going on in it. And so people were maybe not necessarily doing blackface for the racism. And your point is point that I agree with and when I try to make this book, which is I think that gets it exactly backwards. I think people are doing it with the race stuff, right? Like people are doing minstrelsy, they're doing blackface into the popular form because it shores up white supremacy, because it supports white supremacy, and people might also get some other things out of it. But the racism, the actual formative role it plays in fashioning a popular culture of white supremacy was its main function. And because of that, all of these different historical performances, the global reach of it was all really about spreading that culture of white supremacy, all of the different places that, again, imperialism was going. Everywhere that there were colonial outposts, you're finding exactly this kind of performance popular among white people, and really weaving that into the core of a low popular culture.
Glad I did not misread. As I said, this is we read books about racism all the time from authors all over the world. Been here for years, and easily this book, you use the term white supremacy way more frequently than any of the books that I've read recently. And I mean, we've talked about we are always talking about serious subject matter. I was even surprised, like, wow, this is a book about minstrelsy, but whew, it is very explicit. Culture of white supremacy, over and over. Most accurate term to use. I would tell, hey, definitely this is a book you should read. You can learn a lot, but the pictures alone, just flip through. If I don't have time and it's, talking about old stuff and things in Minnesota are happening, just take maybe 10 minutes and flip and look at some of these images. Wow. You don't even have to read the caption if you say you just got 10 minutes because it's a lot of pictures. Look at the pictures. Staggering. I guarantee you will I might even take 10, 20 minutes to look at some of these pictures because they are staggering, and they reveal so much about white supremacy, racism, what it means to be white over quite a bit of time. I learned a bunch. Dr. Hoxworth, might have to give a hat tip to Dr. Montrie, because that's how we ended up being here. He reminded me the minstrel shows, they are important. They are everywhere. That's what he said. So we went from the micro everywhere in Minnesota to everywhere in the world. Whew. Transoceanic Blackface Empire Race Performance. Dr. Kellen Hoxworth joining us live from Buffalo again, hopefully worthy of Tops 2022. Thank you so much for hanging out with us this here Saturday evening. I learned a ton. Hopefully some folks will nab a copy of the book and learn some important details about white culture. Again, great work with the book, great scholarship, and again, thank you for being generous with your time, sir.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Enjoyed it. Pleasure was mine, sir. Again, Dr. Kellen Hoxworth. He said his first book. Excellent job. First time out. We'll keep an eye out for your future scholarship. There's so much material. We'll be looking forward for your future work, sir.
Thank you again. Really, it was a great talk, and wishing you all the best.
Much obliged, good sir. Thank you. Enjoy your evening. Dr. Kellen Hoxworth, Transoceanic Blackface. Man, Context of White Supremacy. I will have to, Dr. Chad Montrie. I said, that was just this month. That was like, it was January 6th, because we talked about the insurrection day. It was January 6th. We had the violence. Nothing to snicker about. The violence is always right there. But Dr. Chad Montrie, he said, the racially restricted regions, I'm super passionate about studying those. And he said, I'm going to study the history of black people being booted out of Minnesota, or them keeping black people out of Minnesota. We don't want no niggers around here, and we specifically want to make Minnesota a place that is not welcoming for black people specifically. And we go about all the ways of doing that. all this great information in his book, Dr. Montrie, I'm talking about, great information, all this, but he said, man, it was, and he wrote about it, he even got pictures in that book, but he said, man, all these pictures of the minstrel shows, and they got them at the school, they got the children, boys and girls. That's why I said it changed. The period that Dr. Hoxworth was telling us about, predominantly white males. By the time we get to Dr. Montrie and the 20th century, it was everybody. It was children in the minstrel shows, white women in the minstrel shows, white men at the minstrel shows, elderly people. Like, it was, man, I mean, everywhere. On stage, in the audience, everywhere. It was total equal opportunity, white people in the minstrel show, blackface, all of that. But man, it was the churches everywhere. And he said it was so much of it. Like, man, that's not even what I'm focused on. They just got racks and racks and racks of it. That's how we ended here. I needed the reminder about what does it mean to be white. And that, I should have been saying that more frequently anyway. The racist jokes, man, when they say the racist jokes are as prevalent as people's searches for the Lakers. Kobe Bryant. Magic Johnson. We talked about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar earlier this week, but they say it's racist jokes. People search for them on par with their searches for the Lakers. I mean, you can't be ignorant about racism and doing all this search for nigger jokes. You can't be ignorant about racism and all this hee hee ha ha at the blackface and the minstrel show and all. That's not ignorance. Same thing I had said before. The racist jokes suggest we enjoy practicing racism. And that's what comes through in reading this book. We find all this hilarious. Mocking black people that don't want to be slaves. Hilarious. And all over the world. Hilarious. That's not ignorance. That's not ignorance at all. Anyhoodles. We would normally be doing compensatory call-in on Saturday. We had white guests today. I said, hey, I can't turn down white guests, especially to talk about a book that was more constructive than I anticipated. That happened twice this week. Standout, right? Not that I expected the book to be bad. I'm not saying that. I did not. If you had asked me before, like, do you think this is going to be a book that uses the term white supremacy more so than any book that you've read recently? I would have said no. Like, and I would have said quickly, like, it's about minstrel shows. Like, I mean, it's about minstrel shows. That's what I would have been thinking. So, surprise. And then the book that we talked about on, what day was that? Wednesday, Police Against the Movement, Joshua Clark Davis. Not that I didn't think it would be constructive, but that wasn't even the book that I wanted to talk about. He has written several books, and I thought that book was a little different than what I was thinking. I was thinking something, I was not thinking local police. That was the difference. So it had a lot of constructive information in that book too. So that is always great, where you get to read two books and they are better than what you thought, more constructive than what you were anticipating, and you got to learn a lot. Great. Reading is more important than watching television. That's it. I'm going to take a quick break, see if I can share a few quick thoughts, see if folks have any thoughts. But this will be one news report, since we would do our compensatory call-in normally on Saturdays. And I know many folks have said for years that sometimes for some people, unfortunately, the compensatory call-in is like their only source for news for the week, or one of their few sources, because they don't really invest the time to check news and what's happening in the world. So I do recognize that is important, and even the review, counter-racist analysis of what is said in these reports and what they talk about or what they omit. I think that is very important. But guests, reading, all that, talking to a white person, super important as well. So one report from the past week, and since we did actually mention Minnesota, or the link with Minnesota and how we got here, talking about the racially restricted regions there. They've been talking about the suspected racist white woman, Renee Nicole Good, being shot there, and then the white man more recently being shot there. They had a report talking about George Floyd and how his death impacted gun laws in Minnesota. We'll catch that for a quick break and then be back, wrap things up. Context of White Supremacy.
All week, the White House has scrambled to respond to public outrage over the fatal shooting of VA nurse Alex Preddy by federal agents. It has changed oversight of its immigration operation and even acknowledged that agents may not have been following protocol. But the administration continues to maintain that Preddy should not have had a firearm. And for some Minneapolis residents, this claim is felt completely out of touch with the reality of gun culture there. NPR domestic extremism correspondent Odette Youssef is here with more. Hi there.
Hey, Juana.
Hey, so Odette, there's been a whole lot of talk about Alex Preddy carrying a gun, but as I recall, you did some reporting out of Minneapolis on gun culture there, right?
I did, yeah. So last winter, I was in Minneapolis looking at an organization called Security, and they offer a number of services, and one of them is they offer permit to carry classes. And at that time, right after Trump's reelection, they were seeing a spike in clients from marginalized backgrounds, people that they characterize as on the left end of the political spectrum. But even before that, Juana, they told me that the first turning point was really after George Floyd's killing at the hands of a Minneapolis police officer in 2020.
And how did Floyd's death change gun culture in Minneapolis?
Well, here's how Kimmy Hull put it to me. She's the founder of Security.
People carry much more regularly than they did before George Floyd. A lot of it has come from the fact that, especially with having to learn how to take care of ourselves, through our community defenses, it's become a normal thing to carry.
So to rewind a bit, Juana, you'll remember that after Floyd was killed, there were protests around the country. But in the communities really directly around where Floyd was killed, faith in police was really broken. Mm-hmm. And in fact, police essentially abandoned service to some of those areas as the unrest was continuing. So residents felt that their safety was up to them. And for some, part of that meant learning to use and carry a gun. And I looked at data from the state, and they show a big jump in people applying for permits to carry in 2020 and 2021, although the data are limited in what they tell us beyond that.
Right. So what then do people make of these assertions by President Trump that Preddy should not have been carrying a gun?
So first off, Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara has said that Preddy was a licensed gun owner with a valid permit to carry. But Hull tells me that she feels like in Minneapolis, again, in part because of this particular local history, it's actually quite normal for people to carry, people from all kinds of political backgrounds.
Well, Odette, has the death of Alex Preddy changed how Hull or others even think about concealed carrying?
So first, Hull and her fellow firearms trainers told me they see a double standard in how the administration is characterizing this case versus armed far-right actors. But also, they told me that Preddy's death is highlighting the danger of carrying if you don't share the president's politics. They say they always advise people not to carry at protests or rallies. But in this case, Preddy was not at that kind of an organized event. He was out, he was concealed carrying, and he started recording something that unfolded on the street where he was.
NPR's Odette Youssef, thank you.
Thank you.
Pause for Philando Castile. See what I mean? That's why I say I definitely recognize a value in, processing news reports that have happened recently and what do they include? What do they omit? I mean, maybe they have a quota limit where we can only mention one privileged male Negro per segment. So we got George Floyd in. I've been talking about Philando Castile for a second. Like, dang, I thought that was Minnesota too. And he was a licensed gun owner and tried to do the correct thing, and they got live stream video of that. They forgot about that already. 2016, oh well. Philando Castile, privileged black male. And in fact, that's exactly everything that they said now. I said that 10 years ago, because that was 2016, Philando Castile, when he was shot and killed. President Trevor, he wasn't even president then. He was running for the White House the first time around. But all of that about the dangers of carrying it, I'm even surprised to be a black person in Minnesota, like, ooh-wee. You would have to get we would have to name it for Philando Castile. We got the Philando Castile training on you're going to be concealed carry and all of that. This is what to do so you can survive safely. This is, I don't know. People pick out and say that he did something incorrect, or he did this or shouldn't have did that. This is what to do. Survive. You get stopped by enforcement officers. If you end up at a protest somehow, some way, if you're driving along, whatever the case may be, this is how to respond, what to do, what not to do, so that you live. They'd have to give me all the rules, because, man, that could be dangerous. I certainly don't know how having a gun would improve your situation if you are detained or stopped by ICE or other enforcement officials. I'm not sure you, being a person classified as black, having a firearm, that's going to improve that situation. Increase your likelihood of going home alive. Victims guaranteed qualified. Any hoodles. I wanted to make sure I got in the names of the 10 victims of the Tops Massacre 2022. Ruth Whitfield, 86. Pearlie Young, 77. Hayward Patterson, 67. Celestine Cheney, 65. Geraldine Talley, 62. Aaron Salter Jr., 55. Andre McNeil, 53. Margus Morrison, 52. Roberta Drury, 32. Catherine Massey, 72. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Again, our guest, Dr. Hoxworth, joining us live. He's a professor at the University of Buffalo, State University of New York. The information we got today, I asked him about it at the very beginning, very much connected to that sort of violence. Again, a lot of those racist jokes and minstrel songs about raping black females. White culture, all connected. Hopefully, if folks, either if they read the book or listen to the broadcast, I cannot say enough. That is a massive lie. And in my view, it is a dangerous lie to conclude that not all white people are racist, and then those who are racist are ignorant. That is, just massive lies. You cannot be ignorant about racism if you are classified as white. That is not possible. You will get in trouble with other white people, and I try to point that out whenever we're talking to a white guest and they have evidence, information to support that. Make that front and center. If you are white, you are expected to know what you are to do, not do as a white woman, white man, white child. You're expected to know. And if you don't know, you will find out immediately. Like, that's not something that they're just going to allow you to fumble and stumble and be messing. Like, no. They're going to pull you to the side probably sooner than later. But you are expected to know this is what to do. This is what not to do on the plantation. Words are important. I can't say that enough as well. I so appreciated his analysis of the word denigration. I really had not slowed down. And I say nigger all the time. It's right there. You are niggerizing me. You are blackening me, talking bad about me. Like, wow, I would not use that term, and or I would make sure to emphasize the Negra part of it, but I probably just not use the term if I got to go through all that to, signify that I'm niggerizing someone by speaking about them in this manner. Like, that is so culture of white supremacy, racism. But I literally had just said something about this, talking about how the language supports the system of white supremacy, where denigrate to have a word like that, and then have Negro right there, and then, like I said, to have him give the analysis right within his text, and that's right at the beginning of the book too. Like, but words so important in the maintenance and refinement of white supremacy, racism. It is no surprise that white people, a lot of their racist jokes center around mocking the speech of people classified as black, either mocking us and saying, well, oh, they don't know how to speak the King's English properly, and oh, they got, funny accents, and oh, they're so ignorant, and they're Negro slang, and that sort of thing. It'll be lots of that, and that continues to this day with a lot of the racist jokes, mocking black people, and black people don't know how to speak, they're not articulate. What about the white people in Appalachia? Just because you don't speak the Queen's or King's English, am I supposed to be mistreated? You got white babies that are 2-3 years old. They don't speak great English either. They need a few more years to get it together. Should they be mistreated? Just saying. Fast forward, man. They make up all kinds of racist logic. I wouldn't care if I could never can't pronounce it. Maybe I can't pronounce my own name. Oh well. Does that mean I should be mistreated? What kind of system is that? Like, come on. Oh, system of white supremacy. I got it. That's why we denigrate, denigra people, denigratize people. See, it'd be a strain to get the denigrate, because it's already got the A in there, see? Probably wouldn't, but yeah. Blackening folks, part of white culture, like, forever. Anything else I would get in importantly about? We should be here on Monday. I don't know if that's related to the book, but we should be here on Monday. White guest on the counter-racist grind for the new year 2026. Hopefully constructive. I generally think, it had to be, I don't know, you'd have to really mess things up to have a white person and not get some constructive value about things. But should have a white guest on Monday, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Get some more practice in asking questions of a white person. Let's see. Anything else? The global, I did not grasp the global nature of the minstrel shows, and even having some of these troops in the 1700s, 1800s going all over the world to show off their opposition to slavery being ended or any other aspect. Like, wow. And that white people knew all of this, celebrated all of this. Let's go watch it 3-4 times. Like, what does it mean to be classified as white? Practice racism. That's what it means. And you're not supposed to be ignorant or stupid about that, period. New book. This book just came out in 2024. Again, like I said, I could kind of see if people said, well, there are more important things, and I don't know if this is useful in helping us grasp how to solve this problem. Fuller did say that white people are the most familiar mystery. I think a book like this goes a long way to demysterizing white people. Provide some clarity, some familiarity with the man, the woman. A long way. And I think that's a massive part of the problem, that we have been very confused, lied to, about what it means to be white. And I think once we get a better grasp of that, maybe, just maybe, we'll be better able to work to solve this problem, and maybe even develop a little bit more courage to go about the business of replacing white supremacy with justice. But I do think an accurate understanding of what it means to be classified as white is sorely missing. Hopefully this will go a long way to helping in that effort. Any hoodles, we should be here on Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. In fact, it reminded me, he called it scriptive blackface. That was the term in the text. Those little performances, like spontaneous. I remember Eric Garner, this is New York, they had a news team, and they were just out filming on the street. This was like recent, after Eric Garner had been killed in 2014. So it was still being adjudicated in court. Are there going to be charges filed and all the rest of it? So they're doing a news scene out on the corner in New York City. While the news crew is filming, I think this is broadcasting live, you can see a pair, looks like two white people behind the reporter. She can't see them. She's got her back to them while she's talking to the camera. But they know, or they can hear, that she's talking about Eric Garner. So they start doing a mocking reenactment of Eric Garner being choked to death. And you can see this on the camera while she's talking. And then they ended up, talking about this later. I'm sure you can find it online. But it reminded me of that. And that, I would call that sort of thing one of the kind of scriptive blackface, these kind of minstrel type performances, mocking black people, really celebrating violence against black people, that sort of thing. And even that's what he talked about in the book. He says sometimes these performances, they can be big stage productions and a massive theater and thousands of people. Sometimes it can be a small in the closet at home performance where it's just you and maybe your brother or family member, something like that. This one got recorded, but it was just those two guys, and then bang, they have their spontaneous performance to mock Eric Garner, racism in general, and celebrate violence against the black male. System of whites, but lots of those types of just, it is racism against black people is to be enjoyed, celebrated. Violence, we talked about this with Dr. Joe Fegan. Violence against black people is to be enjoyed, celebrated. That's the punchline of so many of the racist jokes. And like I said, look at those pictures. This is the end of slavery. What? And look at the artwork that comes from the white brain computer now. What would the end of slavery look like? Oh, we don't have shackles on the nigger anymore. The end of white supremacy could be. Any hoodles, we will be here on Monday. Hopefully, see if we can be constructive. Much obliged for folks tuning in. Hopefully worthy of your Saturday evening. We'll have our compensatory call-in back next Saturday, methinks. So we can get back to catch up on some of the news and reports for Negro History Month. It'll be Negro History Month tomorrow, so be constructive, I guess, be alert, I'll say, for racist shenanigans, certainly in the workplace for February. We will be back directly. Sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. You do not want to be out into... Oh, I just saw they are looking at changing the limit for drunk driving, impaired driving in Washington State. They're looking to lower it to 0.05. It's 0.08 blood alcohol content at this level, and they're looking to make it 0.05. I think Utah and Washington State would have the strictest driving under the influence laws, which I totally celebrate. We do not need in 2026, especially with self-driving cars and all the rest of it, we do not need motorists had a sip or three of the Mad Dog and then hop behind the wheel and drive over top of Leroy and all the rest of us. Like, come on. Sobriety, especially if you're going to be driving. That said, Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other victims of racism. We ask that you remind us to stop saying not all white people are racist. Remind us to stop name-calling black people. White people have encouraged that misconduct for decades. Remembrances, condolences to the victims of the Tops Massacre, those who perished, those who were injured, those who were impacted. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
Man, I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.